Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of the Daily Stand-Up. Lee Henson here from AgileDad. Without any further ado, let's get started. One thing that we wanted to really pull together this week as we wind down our discussion about teams, and specifically teams and the topics that are important to you. Many of these topics this week have been submitted by our episode listeners to the podcast here, and we greatly appreciate that. In fact, we encourage you, if you have topics you want to discuss, to send those over to learnmoreatagiledad.com, where we'll review those topics and get them queued up so that we can do a podcast available about those. We have one of our listeners ask about the Tuckman model. They said, you bring up this Tuckman model and you talk about it. It's a term that they haven't been familiar with. So they asked me if I'd spend just a few moments discussing what the Tuckman model is and why is it important. So the Tuckman model comes in multi-pieces. It starts with forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Now, in Agile, we don't like to focus on adjourning. We believe that teams should be long-term, that they should work well together throughout, and that if they're ever going to become performing and stay performing, that our hope is that we never break those teams apart unless it's absolutely necessary to do so. So our focus is going to be on the first four: forming, storming, norming, and performing. So starting with forming. Forming is when teams form, when they merge, when they become self-organized, when the team members are all, assessed or allocated a location and say, okay, this is the work that we're going to be tackling. Let's form teams, and the teams get together and choose each other so that they can best tackle the work. Another phase of forming, if you will, is when they're introduced to the work. So sometimes when teams are first introduced to the work, there's lots of questions, and making sure you have the right cross-functional skill sets and making sure you have the right people to be able to tackle whatever work is thrown in your path. This is all part of forming. It's where we're just getting to know each other, getting to know the work, getting to understand the topics better, and getting to really address each other and to build ways of communication. This is where we're forming working relationships and building team agreements and building out a definition of done within the organization. This is where all those things are happening. The second phase of the Tuckman model is called storming. Now, many people mistake and say, oh, this is brainstorming. Well, really, it's not. Storming is when everyone disagrees. Storming is when things aren't necessarily going right, because as the team gets to know each other, they tend to feel like maybe I'm right and they're wrong, or maybe I'm better at doing something than they are. Perhaps I, need to explore better what I can do, and it's always, oh, well, I know what I'm doing, so that must be the best option. And whoa, it just, things get crazy when teams are storming, because it tends to be the I'm right and you're all wrong, you just haven't realized it yet, except for everyone feels that way kind of mentality, right? And if everyone feels like they're right, it creates friction. And this is the storming that I'm talking about. Now, I want to make sure I go on record and say that storming is a necessary part of doing this, and it's not always a bad thing. In fact, when many teams swarm, that's when they have discovery. So that's when they discover gaps of things that are missing. That's when they discover that not all individuals are T-shaped. That's when they discover that they may not have a clear understanding of all the things that are necessary in order to deliver a product or service. That's when they discover that they need to refine their definition of done. There's lots of refinement that happens. So instead of really calling it storming, I almost wish it would have been called refinement, because it's more of the refiner's fire, where, even though it hurts, right, it's a fire, it helps us to re-engage and to better understand why we're going about this and what work we're trying to do. So there's definitely some interesting piece here where we need to refine in order for us to have success. So I think if we focus on that refinement piece and look at it as a way to storm to get to a solution, it's going to make us better as an individual and better as a team. And then there's norming. I almost wish this would have been normalizing, because this is where we tend to come to terms with we can't all be right, and we'll listen to everyone's opinions with respect and with due diligence choose which way or which direction makes most sense for us to go as a group or as individuals in a group. And this is where we learn to work together and build relationships, and we get to the point where we start really delivering product increment that's high quality and that people are proud of, and that people start seeing this is where the team really makes a difference. This is where you can really see things starting to pick up and starting to flow. Now, the last one is called performing, and this is interesting. Only 10% of teams roughly make it to performing, and I know many of you may go, what? I have lots of high-performing teams, but in actuality, most high-performing teams are only norming. The reason why so few teams actually make it to high-performing is because they have several natural enemies, one of which is leadership. Because oftentimes when leadership sees a team that's high-performing, that's hitting the groove, that's doing everything they need to do, I mean, these teams are hitting on every cylinder. Oftentimes the Scrum Master is just there kind of like a hood ornament, or I call them the tree hanging from the mirror, because they're there just to make sure that the team has what they need to survive, and they're not there to necessarily solve impediments or to do other things. They're just there to make sure that if the team has a hiccup or needs a water run, or I jokingly say that, but the Scrum Master often takes on another team when one of their teams hits high performing, because there's just not a lot for a Scrum Master to do. It's important to still have them there, but there's just not a lot for them to do going on with a high performing team. So when we get these high performing teams, leadership tend to either pile the work on until the team's no longer high performing. Hey, you can handle more work, let's do it. And they'll just pile it on. Or they'll say, hey, that's a team of 7. I want 7 high performing teams. So I'm going to chop that team up into 7 pieces and have 7 high performing teams, because each of those individuals will be able to inspire others to be high performing. But what they don't realize is when you chop the rattlesnake into 7 pieces, the rattlesnake is dead. So it's important for us to, when we have a performing team, to back off, to treat them with dignity and respect, to back off, to let them continue to be performing, to let them accelerate, and to let them experience and get excited, to give them an opportunity to really dig in and enjoy being a high-performing team. Because the truth is, most high-performing teams either become permanently high-performing or they don't last long, which is a very interesting concept. Once they realize they're high-performing, they either do everything they can to make sure it never gets broken up, or they quickly get discovered, and obviously with leadership and other people involved, they get broken up. And that's unfortunate but true. So this concept of the Tuckman model is also referred to as an evolution of teams. It's the way the teams evolve and become better at what they do, and it's the way that organizations become better at delivering products and services. Now, you may have heard earlier in the week when we discussed Team John that I said that teams that were in a forming or storming state probably wouldn't be a good fit for trying to implement that Team John mentality. Now I hope you understand why. That teams who are norming, and many teams do, are perfectly fine. There's no reason to push a norming team to become performing. It's almost an organic thing where if you have the right composition, it just works. Sure, you can provide them with tools necessary to become performing, but in no way can you drive individuals and force them into a performing state. So if I were a good Scrum Master or Agile coach, I would say let's dedicate our focus on the teams that are forming and storming, and let the teams that are norming do their thing, make sure they have the right tools, and of course back away from the high-performing teams and just let them continue to be high-performing. I hope that this topic's been useful to you. As always, we encourage you to visit AgileDad.com, where you can learn more about this and many other Agile topics. Until next time, take care, my friends. Stay Agile, stay well, stay healthy, and we'll see you again soon. Have a good one.